I'm going to show you how to create a soft body simulation in Blender. So I'm going to go ahead and click Blender here, and it may ask me this. In order to open it, I'm going to need to say open. And in a moment, the Blender interface will open. Currently, this is Blender 4.5 that I'm creating this tutorial with. We have this splash screen here. We can just leave this to its current settings. I'm going to click Continue. And then again, we have this. It says, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to create general, 2D animation, sculpting, VFX, video editing? Right now, I'm just going to click off of this splash screen just to the side of it, and then I am in this active window. Let me just explain a little bit about the controls in Blender and some of the things you see there. This is my scene collection. This is what is in the scene. I have a camera, a cube, and a light. This is my camera, this is the cube, and this is the light. And a little bit about those controls. To zoom in and out, I can do the scroll on the mouse. So I'm zooming in and out. Or I can also hit Command on the keyboard. I'm holding Command, and I'm holding the middle mouse and going forward and back on the mouse, kind of moving it in and out. And there is that scroll. Now if I want to orbit, then I hold the middle mouse button and I just drag left and right and around, and now I'm orbiting around what is there. And currently this is World Center. And that little icon in the middle, that is the 3D cursor. And if I want to shift my viewpoint, so I scroll out a little bit, maybe I can orbit around. If I want to shift where I'm viewing, I can hold Shift on the keyboard and middle mouse, and now I can slide through almost like I am on a dolly. So I can move left and right by holding Shift on the keyboard. And that's just a little bit about the controls. Now if I want to view from the camera, then I can hit this little camera icon here, and now I'm viewing from the camera. This is showing me what the camera sees. But you'll notice that if I do middle mouse, I move out of that camera view. So I'm not seeing what the camera is viewing. So what I like to do, if I want to set up my camera, I would hit this camera icon. Now I'm viewing from the camera. Then I hit this little arrow to the right side here, and it expands this drawer here. And I'm going to go to the tab that says View. And then there is a button here, a little checkbox that says Camera to View. What that means is now as I am controlling, this is controlling the camera itself. I'm able to move the camera physically around. So I'm pushing further away, or I'm getting closer, or I can hold Shift and I can slide around. So that is how I can change that perspective. And then if I want to move out of the camera, then I could just click one of these. So right now I'm viewing from the X, or I can view from the Y, or I can view from the Z, so I'm looking straight down. And even from one of these views, I can hit the middle mouse and I'm moved out of that. Or if I hit that camera icon again, now I'm back in the camera. Or if I don't want to control the camera, I can uncheck that, and then I can just middle mouse and I've moved out of it. Though sometimes when you're viewing from here, I'm not controlling the camera. Now if I'm zooming in, what I'm zooming in and out of is just the magnified area there. So sometimes you have to be careful if you've zoomed in like this and you don't know that you're actually viewing from the camera view. So I'm going to just punch out a little bit so I can see that. So I like to put it about here, and I'm going to move out of the camera. So I'm just going to middle mouse and set it up there. But now if I punch back a little bit, you can see my camera's moved further back because that is what I did with it when I was viewing it from the camera point of view. All right, enough about those particular controls. Let me just quickly go down this list here. So this is my select box. That is how I can select an object. So if I click off, then that's no longer selected. But if I click this, now that is selected. This is my 3D cursor. We're going to just leave that. This is the move tool. So I can click this, and that is how I can move this. And then it says what axes I want to move that on. My rotate tool, I can rotate that. And then if I want to, I can also scale it. So right now I'm scaling, I'm grabbing kind of outside of that area, just right beyond that, not grabbing on one of these particular axis is, but just right here. And now I'm resizing it from the middle, and that's resized. But I'm going to go ahead and reset all of that. I'm going to just do Command Z. I'm going to undo some of that work. And then set up for this particular project. So there's a cube. We're going to leave that default cube. That's what it's called, the default cube. I have it selected. The other thing to take note of, I can also control the camera by grabbing this little gizmo up here. But here's my default cube. It is currently selected. I'm going to get that move tool, and I'm going to move that cube up a little bit. I'm going to get the rotate tool. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate it about like this, so moving it along those axes. And if I click view from the camera, I can see that it is outside of the camera view. I'm not going to worry about that right now. And I'm going to rotate out. Okay, so there's my cube. That's what I want. For this project, I've raised the cube up and I have just angled it a little bit, rotated a little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add something. I'm going to add something for this cube to interact with. So I'm going to go to the Add menu here, and I'm currently in what's called the Object mode. I'm going to click Add. I'm going to add a mesh, and I'm going to add a plane. And then you can see this plane, and it is back to world center. What I want to do to this plane is I want to scale it up. So I select the Scale tool. I'm just going to click and drag and make that plane nice and large. And now I have a cube and I have a plane. I'm going to make some changes to this cube because I want to take this and I want to make it a simulation. So I want it to simulate gravity and seem like it's a gelatin cube. So I have this cube selected, and then I'm going to come down to this side here. I'm going to look for this thing that says physics. You see that? Physics. I click that and I say, well, what do I want to do with this? I'm doing a soft body simulation. So I'm going to tell this that this is a soft body. Now if I hit play, here's the play button right here, or if I don't hit play there, I'm going to hit here, click this to back to the beginning of time. I can also hit the space bar. You'll notice that it just kind of hovers there because I have not unchecked this thing goal. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of time, and I recommend you don't just grab this thing if you want to go to the beginning of time, because if you do, then you might drag too far back. And in Blender, the beginning of time begins at 1. So I'm going to click forward, and then I can click back, and then you can see, well, there, that is the beginning of time, frame 1. So at the beginning of time, I have soft body on, and if I want to turn it off, I can hit the X, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave that soft body on, but I'm going to uncheck this box that says goal. Now if I hit play or a space bar, it falls, but you'll notice it falls straight through that plane. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of time, and I need to make some changes to this plane. So I'm going to select the plane. Plane is now selected. You can see it is highlighted. I want to say that this is not a soft body, but a rigid body. So again, in my physics tab, I click rigid body, and then if I hit play, what happens? Well, they both fall. That's because currently I said this rigid body is active. So I'm going to uncheck that and choose passive. And now let's play and see what happens. Well, it falls, the cube falls, but the plane doesn't fall, but it doesn't interact. Because I didn't tell Blender that I want some sort of collision to happen here. So I'm going to go ahead with the plane selected. I'm going to hit collision. And then I'll leave those settings for what they are right now, and then I hit play. And there you'll notice that that cube kind of just goes splat. It hits the ground and kind of collapses on itself. That's okay. So what I'm going to do though is make some changes to this. So what I can do to this cube, now I'm going to select the cube, and then in here I'm going to click this thing that says edges, because in Blender things are made up of edges, they're made of vertices, which are those points, and they're also made up of faces, the flat areas. So I'm going to expand this where it says edges, and here where it says bending, I'm going to punch in, maybe I'll punch in 5 for right now. I hit 5, and I'm going to hit play, and let's see what happens. There, you can see it kind of jiggles a little bit more rigid. So I changed that to 5. But it doesn't really look like gelatin. Jiggles a little bit, but not really like gelatin. So if I could add more edges to this and more faces, smaller faces, then I might see it jiggle a bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with this selected, I'm going to change my mode to the edit mode. So here I went down to edit mode. Now it looks a little bit different. You'll notice it is still all selected because I didn't deselect anything. But what I want to do is I want to add divisions to this cube. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to tell it to subdivide. And I'm going to right click again. I'm going to tell it to subdivide again. So, and I think that should be okay for this. So we're going to go ahead and try that. But I'm still currently in the edit mode. If I hit play, you'll notice nothing happens because I'm still in the edit mode. I'm going to go back to the object mode. Now if I hit play, let's see what happens. It kind of jiggles around a bit, looks a little bit more jelly-like, but the problem is you'll notice that it looks a little bit blocky on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click this and I'm going to tell it to smooth shade and see how that looks. Now it looks a little smoother, but it kind of looks a little bit funky here. Doesn't look normal. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of time and I'm going to make another change to this. I'm going to modify this cube and I'm going to add what's called a subdivision surface. So modify it. I'm going to be using this modifier here. I'm going to click that wrench and that brings up this. Now currently I have a soft body modifier. I'm going to leave that, but it says add modifier. I click that add modifier and what I want to do is I want to generate a subdivision surface. So here I add modifier and I look for generate and then I'm going to go down in this menu and I'm going to look for subdivision surface. So if I click that, it takes a moment and then it creates this subdivision surface. And then that creates more, in a sense it's like it is creating or simulating creating more edges. And we're going to leave these basic settings right here. We could increase them, but we want it to render quickly, so we'll just do it like that. And now if I hit play, let's take a look at what that looks like. So it jiggles around a bit more. I could make further changes to this. What I could do is I could go back to that edit mode, and right now I could right click this and I can subdivide one more time and then go back to the object mode. Now you'll notice that edge looks a little bit more defined and it's still applying also the subdivision surface. If I hit play, maybe it jiggles around quite a bit more and it's kind of collapsing a little bit on under its own weight. So I can go back to the beginning of time. I can make some further changes to this. What I can do is I'm going to go with this cube selected. I'm not going to be in that wrench, but I'm going to go to that physics tab. And earlier I set the bending at 5. I'm going to set the bending at 7 and hit enter and take a look at that. And maybe that's what I like for this. I'm going to just kind of orbit around and take a look at that. And if I want to, I could also rotate it a bit more. Maybe see what that looks like if it's a little bit more rotated. And you notice it kind of squished in here. There are some other changes you can make here. I can change these pull and push. These are like forces for this. So I'm going to pause this and go back to the beginning of time. And maybe I'm going to take that pull, it pulling in on itself. Maybe I can take that to 0.7. And let's take a look and see what that does. That might work a little bit more. So I think I'm pretty well set up. You could experiment with these things, but I think these settings are pretty good for this particular project. So I have this soft body simulated here. I have this plane that it is interacting with, it is colliding with. Let's say I want to see what this would look like from the camera. I hit that camera, and now I'm viewing it from the camera. But what I don't like is I see that edge of that, but we'll take care of that a little bit later. And then also it doesn't have the right coloring. And I'm not really looking at what it would look like if it were rendered. And what I want to do is I want to see what would it look like if it's rendered. So if I hit this last little bubble here at the top, this is going to give me viewport shading. It's going to give a rendered preview. If I hit that, it might take a moment for it to show up. And then after it shows up, it's going to show me what it would look like. Remember, I have that light in there. That's why I see that shadow. This is the rendered view. It still might not be what I'm looking for. The other thing is I really don't like this particular light for this project. So we're going to be making some changes to that. I'm going to show you how to create a different type of light and then also how to add some coloring to this. So I'm going to pull out of my camera here and take a look at this. I'm going to just zoom out a little bit so we can see this. I don't want this light anymore. I'm going to select that light, and that light is right here. You can see it hovering right there, and you can see the effect that it is having on that plane and also on the cube and the shadow it's creating. I don't want that on a Mac. I would hit X on the keyboard. If I were on Windows, I would hit delete. But if I hit X, it says, do you want to delete this selected object? I'm going to click yes, or I'm going to click delete. You'll notice that my world got all dark because I don't have any light in this world. I also have this wall of, or the world itself is gray. That is just giving that gray cast to it. So I'm going to add a light. So I'm going to click add. And then in here, I'm going to look for light. And I'm going to choose area. Now it made a light right here. I'm going to move that light up first. I'm going to move that light up. And then when it's low to the ground, you can kind of see, like in the physical world, what it would be doing. I'm going to raise it up. But you'll notice that light isn't real bright. I also have a control here where I can change the angle of it. So I can take that light right there, maybe point it somewhat at that cube. I think the light is not real bright, and it's also not the right size. So I'm going to scale it up. But you'll notice if I scale it up, it also seems to be getting even dimmer. So I need to control that light a bit more. So on this menu over here, I'm going to click this light bulb. Because I have a light selected, I have access to this menu. I can click this, and well, what do I want to do? This is the color of that light. I'm going to leave it alone for this particular project. And here is the power or the intensity. And I'm going to leave the exposure alone because this affects the exposure of the image, and I don't want to do that. I want to just adjust the power of this light. So if I take this, I'm going to punch in perhaps 500 and hit enter. Now you'll see the effect of that even more. Now it might look a little bit pixely. That's because it's not fully rendered. It's just giving me a preview of what this would look like. But you'll notice that I have this large, soft light that is created by this area light. There are other lights that can be created, but for this project, I'm just going to do that area light. But some of the other lights you can see here, I have a point light. That's the one I deleted earlier. You could create a sun or a spotlight. But for this particular project, I want to have this nice, soft area light. So I have a light in this world, and then I also have a simulated gelatin cube and this rigid body. So if I hit play, then I can kind of see what that looks like. Next thing I want to do for this is I want to do some shading. So I'm going to select my cube and I'm going to change the shading of this. And I can change the shading with this thing's materials. But before I do that, I want to change how I am rendering this. So I'm going to click this camera here where it says render, and currently the render engine, how it is converting what I have into images, it is using this thing called Eevee. Now Eevee is great for certain things. It renders very quickly, but what I want is I want to use this one called cycles. So I click this camera here, this render, and I'm going to change to cycles. Now it might take a moment, and then that is going to be a little bit closer. You'll notice that it might seem a little bit more pixely or kind of grainy or noisy, and then it kind of cleans up a little bit. So as I orbit around, it looks a little pixely. That's what it's supposed to do because it is doing a lot more calculations what it might look like. But this is not my final. It is just a preview. So I've set my render engine to cycle, so I will leave that for this particular project. And now I'm going to go ahead and change that material. So I'm going to hit this material button, and currently it says this is the base color for this particular object. So I'm going to change that base color. I'm going to hit this, and then I've got this color picker, and I'm going to choose perhaps something kind of red. We got some red gelatin. But that gelatin is not transparent and it looks a bit rough. So we're going to fix that. So here, what I want to happen is I want to change the transmission. I want light to actually be able to transmit through this. So I'm going to change the weight of that transmission. I'm going to crank it up. And now you'll notice that now I can see through that. And you'll also notice not only can I see through it, but I'm also seeing the light as it goes through is becoming red, and it's casting this red light on the ground. I'm going to take that gelatin color and I'm going to darken that red a little bit, maybe about like this. Still a problem with this, you'll notice that it looks kind of rough, not shiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse that transmission. I don't need that anymore. I crank the weight up to 1. And what I want to change is the roughness. I'm going to take that roughness and I'm not going to increase it, but I'm going to decrease. I'm going to click and drag on the keyboard, and now it is not as rough. And now if I hit play, take a look at that, again, it's going to look kind of blocky. Take a moment as it's rendering, but now I can see the effects of that even more. Next thing I want to do is adjust the color of this world. I don't want this gray world. I want to change the color of the world to black. So I'm going to hit this world button, and this is the color of the world right now, and currently the surface is a background. You can add things like images, but for this particular project, I'm just going to change the color. I'm going to hit that right there, and I'm going to take this slider and drag it all the way down to black. And I think that is creating the mood I'm going for this particular project. So I'm going to go to the beginning of time, orbit around, kind of take a look at that. I might want to make some changes to this. I'm going to grab this plane. I'm actually going to scale it up even more. Scale it up like this, so it seems like it just disappears. And I'm going to view from my camera view. I think it's a pretty good starting point, but I want to change this just a little bit. So I'm going to take this cube. I have it selected. I'm going to go to the Move tool. I'm going to move it out because this is indicating what it would look like from my camera point of view. I'm also going to turn this camera to view on. I don't need that drawer right now, so I'm going to just collapse this. And I don't need that. I can just kind of drag it this way. And now I've got a little bit more space here. Now, if I start my animation here and then have it hit, that's kind of what it would look like. But what I would like is I want to add a little bit of suspense. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my cube and I'm going to raise it up. Now, when I was raising it up like that, completely disappeared. So I'm going to go pull this drawer out a little bit, hit that View tab, expand it, and I'm going to turn this camera to view off and just kind of see what happened here. Where did it go? Well, I dragged it up and it's completely out of view, but I dragged it a little bit too much because it is outside of the view of this light. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to look for my area light. You can see that I dragged it up. That's why it disappeared. So I'm going to move my area light up above that cube. So make sure that your area light is above the cube. Now it did affect that lighting. I'm going to view back from the camera point of view. And then I can see, well, maybe it's not bright enough anymore, or maybe I moved that cube up too high. So for this particular thing, I don't want that cube up too high. So I've got my area light. Maybe I'll get my area light in the right place, right there. And I'm going to go back to that cube, and I'm going to move my cube down. And get that in a better position. Go back to my camera view and take a look at that. But again, I wouldn't want to start the animation here, because if I do, I think you'll also notice because I raise it up, it is having a lot more of an impact. As it hits, it's going to be a bit more squashed, because it was actually simulating what it would be like if I raised it even higher and dropped it from a higher altitude. So I'm just going to make some quick adjustments to this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the beginning of time, and I'm going to take this cube and I'm going to put it so it's just outside of the view of the camera. And then I'm going to go to that area light one more time, zoom out so I can see it, and I'm going to move that area light down. So I'm going to be moving that down. So bringing it closer, you'll also notice that as I bring it closer, it gets brighter. But again, I'm only going to see what's in here. So if I zoom in here, that's how it is going to begin. And again, right now, because this camera view is unchecked, I'm not controlling it. And when rendered, all I would see is this little bit here. So now I'm going to go ahead, go back in time, and beginning of time right there, and hit play and take a look at that. And that is perhaps what I want for this project. Falling cube, it kind of splats, bounces around, slides around. But again, there are other things you could do with this. If I wanted to, I could have more than one cube. I could have a cube hit another cube. What I did do earlier in that edit mode, I think I may have added too many subdivisions here. Fewer subdivisions might work a little bit better, but because what I had done is I said subdivide, and I kept subdividing it. Maybe I did one too many subdivisions. But let me go back to that object mode. Now, if I wanted to render this to see a final video of this, it is going to have to figure all of this out and draw it frame by frame. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this render button, and I'm going to choose render image. I just want to see what it would look like if it were to render this frame. Then you'll notice that it starts to render it. It creates these samples. But currently it is set to do 4,096 samples. You'll notice that this is taking quite a while. And for a simple project like this, that is probably too many samples. Now, the more powerful computer you use, the faster it is able to render. But right now, this is going to take way too long for me to render this, and so it's not that important to have that many samples. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this and show you how to set those render settings. So I earlier set it to the cycles render engine, but I want to change it to fewer samples. So instead of 4096, for this project, I think 40 samples would be good enough. But instead of using this device, the CPU, the central processing unit, I'm going to choose the graphics processing unit, the GPU compute. And this will use the graphics processor to do that. So it's going to offload some of that work. And if you have a decent graphics card, that can actually speed up your render. So I'm currently using cycles, GPU compute, and I'm only doing a max samples of 40. Also double check that denoise is turned on. That's going to get rid of that speckly look eventually when it's rendered. But if we wanted to just see what it would look like if I were to render an image, I go to render, render image, and it's going to render that. It's going to take a little bit of time, but using that GPU should render a little bit faster. And currently it's at 30 samples, and then it is finished at 40. So it has done one image. But that is only one image. That is not the whole animation. It is just one still image. So that was just rendering one image, but if I want to render the whole animation, I need to make sure that I'm saving it in the right place. So I'm also going to double check all of these settings. So the current resolution I want set to 1920 by 1080 pixels, and that is HD. I also want to make sure that I'm filming or going to render at the right frame rate, 24 frames per second. I'm going to start at frame 1, end at frame 250. That's what my timeline is set at for this. And I want to save it at the right file format. I'm going to save it as a PNG, which is a still image format. I'm going to do RGB with alpha channel. I will leave it at the color bit depth of 8. Compression, by default, I think is normally at around 15, but I'm going to crank that all the way down to 0. I don't want any compression for this. And then I need to make sure I save it in the right place. So I hit this folder, and then I'm not going to save it in the default place. I'm going to go to my thaw space. I'm going to go to my folder for this project. I'm going to go to my Gelatin folder. and this is where my project is currently saved, but I want to save the renders in their own folder. So in here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose New Folder. And what do I want to call this? I'm going to call this Gelatin Renders. And then I need to double click it and then click Accept. That means it is going to accept that location. I'm saving it as Gelatin Renders. But I can double check that by clicking this. I have this folder called Gelatin Renders. So I'm saving here. If you save it at any other place, it could be wiped out if the computer is restarted, or you could accidentally be putting it in someone else's folder and they wouldn't know and they might delete it. So very important that you go in your folder and it is saved there. So all of these things are correct. And this overwrite, what that means is if I had started a render before and I want to I can save my old ones or keep my old ones. I'm going to leave that checked for right now. I don't have anything else in that folder as you saw earlier. So I'm going to come up here and instead of render image, I'm going to choose render animation. And if I click that, it is going to start to render that animation frame by frame. It's kind of zipping through those samples, kind of going quickly. And in a moment, it should go from 31 to 40, and then it just started the next frame. So it's zipping through that. Now, if I wanted to see what those renders would look like or make sure that they're going in the right place, I'm going to minimize this for now, minimize this for now, and I'll just show you that. So if I go to my ThoughtSpace folder on this computer, I go to my middle school filmmaking one for this project, Gelatin. These are my project files, but here are my renders. If I double click that, then I see I have frame 1 is done and frame 2 isn't done. I don't need to open that. In a moment, frame 3 should show up, and you can see the size of it there. Frame 3 is starting to show up, and then there it is. This is going to take a while. I'm going to close that and bring this render back up. My render window here, here's that active window now. This is my render, and that is what it is doing. Like I said, this is going to take a while, so what I'm going to do is pause this recording and come back to it after it is done. All right, so now it is finished rendering all of those images. I'm going to close this render window here, and just to be safe, I'm going to do a file save or Command S. Now this is saved. I'm actually done with this. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now I'm going to go to my ThoughtSpace folder and I'm going to take a look at those gelatin renders. If I open this up, you can see that I have all of these still images from 1 to 250 images. So next is to take these and put them into a video. I'm going to go ahead and open up Adobe Premiere. Now, when you first open up Premiere, you might have something like this, or perhaps some little other splash screens. First thing we're going to do with this is start a new project. When I click that New Project button, it asks, well, what do I want to call this project and where do I want to put it? So I'm going to call this Gelatin Plop. But the location, at first, it might say choose location, or it might be going to documents. You need to make sure it is in your place. I think the default would be this one here. Don't put it there because on the lab computers it will be erased. I'm going to click choose location just so you can see how I navigate that. So I would go to my ThoughtSpace, and then I would go to my folder, and then I would go here. I'm not going to put it in the gelatin renders. I'm just going to put it in this outer folder, because the only thing I want in the render folder are the images themselves, nothing else in there. So I'm going to click select, and then it's going into that folder, and I click create. Might take a moment. I'm going to ignore all of this stuff. I'm not going to use any of this, and I'll just leave these things. I'm going to go ahead and click skip. When you first open Premiere, especially here in the lab where our computers are locked down, the windows will be in perhaps a different order. It is most likely going to be in this learning setup. We're not going to use that learning setup. Instead, we're going to go to Window, Workspaces, Editing. That's the one you're going to use most often in Adobe Premiere. Now these windows, you can customize them. As you can see this. You can also drag things around. But that also means you can kind of mess things up if you are watching someone else's tutorial. So now these windows are all messed up, and I want to put them back in the right place. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to Window, Workspaces. If I say Editing, well, it'll tell me or nothing's going to happen. Instead, what I want to do is Window, Workspaces, and I'm going to say Reset to Save Layout. That's going to reset the editing layout. So I say Reset to Save Layout, and it puts everything back in its place. Next thing I need to do is import that footage or all those still images. I could click this import here. This is my project bin. This includes all of the project files for this project. Or I could go to this input thing, but sometimes this is kind of confusing. So I'm going to go back to edit. Or I can go File, Import, and you'll also notice there is a shortcut, Command I. What I normally do is I just double click this section here, this project bin, and then it brings up the import window. So I'm going to go to Thaw Space, My Folder, Gelatin, Gelatin Renders. Now what I don't want to do is select all of these, because these are still images. If I did select them all and import them, it would bring in 250 files, and if I tried to put it in a timeline down here, each file by default would take 5 seconds. So that would be an extremely long animation that would go very slowly. So instead, I'm going to select just the first one, and then I'm going to hit this Show Options button, and I'm going to say that this is an image sequence. All of these files are named, and they are in an order, so Premiere will recognize that order and bring it in as though it is a piece of video. Though keep in mind, if ever you misplace one of these or delete one of these, it would stop at that sequence. If I got rid of 25, it would only do up to 24 on the import. And it would, because it would notice a break in sequence. So these are all named properly. I just select the first one, I say image sequence, and I click import. And then I can kind of see what it would look like in a video. Then I want to convert this into a timeline where I can do some edits. I can click and drag this over to here, but before I do that, I want to make sure that Premiere is seeing this in the right way. Right now, if I hover over this, it says Gelatin Render, and it just says that first one because it turned it into a video. But if I hover over, you'll notice that it says 29.97p. That means it thinks that this video is 29.97 frames per second. Whereas in Blender, I had set it up for 24 frames per second. So it misinterpreted this footage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click this clip, and I'm going to go to Modify, Interpret Footage. And then I get this window here. And it says, use the frame rate from the file. It is misinterpreting it. So instead, I'm going to say, assume this frame rate. Now I don't want it at 1 frame per second. I want it at 24. So assume this frame rate 24, click OK. And now you'll notice it says 10 seconds and 10 frames. So this is frames, the ones that are furthest to the right, then seconds, and then it would be minutes and hours. Now I can take this, drag it in here, and it's going to create a timeline based on that. So I can drag through. I'm going to hit and then we can kind of see what that looks like. And it just ends there. You'll notice that when I dragged it in, it just looks like a solid piece of video. But these look similar. It has almost the same name. This is Gelatin Renders, and it ends in a .png. This says Gelatin Renders. You'll notice the symbol is different too. This symbol means that it is a piece of video. This symbol means that it is a sequence. Just so you're not confused, I'm going to click this name. You notice it is blue highlighted, or you can select it and right click, and you can choose to rename. But the faster way to do it is just click the name. It is blue highlighted, and I can call this movie, so that I know that, oh, this is my movie, this is just the file. So this indicates its sequence. Now the reason that this is blue here is because it is telling me that this is used somewhere in a sequence. Right now I only have one video clip, so it doesn't seem that important. But if you had lots of video clips and you were wondering which ones were actually used, it would be the ones that have the blue highlight. So that is kind of started. Next thing I want to do is perhaps I want this to fade in. I can right click over the left edge of this and I can choose Apply Default Transition. The default transition is a cross dissolve. And a cross dissolve kind of works like a fade if there is no video in front of it. So if I hit play, now you'll notice that it fades in and then plops. And then I can also right click the right edge here where you see that red bracket show up and click Apply Default Transition. And then it will fade out. Another way to do that, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to do Command Z just so you can see where I get those effects. So this is my project media browser. That's kind of for finding your things. This would be to do graphics and libraries and info. We're going to go to the effects one right here. Now if the effects is hidden, you could find it with this double arrow and then bring up the window. So I'm going to click effects. Here are different effects that I can apply. The only one I'm pointing out right now is under video transition. I expanded that, dissolve, and then this is the cross dissolve. That would be the same as dragging it here. So dragging it here would be the same as applying a default transition. You notice that this is got a little blue box around it. That's telling me that this is the default transition. So we have it transitioning in. Next thing I want to do is save this. I'm going to do a Command S, and that saved it because I already did a save as earlier. You'll also notice here, save is right here, Command S. Now this might be doing some backup saves in the background, but you really want to make sure you are saving it. Next thing I want to do with this is add some sound effects. So I'm going to take this window and I'm going to shrink this window a little bit, grab this edge, pull it here. Now on our computers we do have some sound effects that are in our Adobe library, and we have them in ThawSpace. And I'm going to go back, not to Media Browser, I'm going to go to my project, and I'm going to be putting my sound effects in here. Just to stay organized, I'm going to click New Bin, and then it creates this little folder, and I'll call this Sounds. And then if I double click that, now I'm in the Sounds one. To get out of this folder, I can hit this arrow here. Now these folders only exist, or these bins only exist inside here. If I checked my ThawSpace, I wouldn't see this bin. I am currently viewing it as this icon view. I could also view it as a list view. And then if I wanted to expand sounds, then I could expand it, but right now you'll see that there's nothing in it, so that's why nothing else is showing up. I'm going to go back to that icon view. So I have this is my video clip, here is my sequence and sounds. I'm going to double click that, now I'm in the sounds one. The reason is I'm going to be looking for sound effects and be dragging them into here. So I'm going to go over to ThawSpace, double click here, and then I have this folder, Adobe Sound Effects. I'm going to double click that, and maybe I want some sort of squish sound. So I'm going to go to this search, and I'll type squish. Now, right now it is searching the whole Mac. I don't want to search the whole Mac. I only want to search this folder. So I say search, and then I say Adobe Sound Effects. Now, when you get to these, don't double click them, because if you double click them, it's going to open up Apple Music. Instead, I can just hit the space bar, and then it'll play the sound. And I can hit right on my keyboard or the right arrow, and I go to the next one. So I can choose one of these. So let me just kind of look through. Maybe I like that one. So what I can do is I'm going to drag that. I could drag it right down to my timeline, but I don't want to do that yet. I'm going to just drag it into my sound effects bin here. And then I'm going to drag it and I can put it underneath. And timing is going to be important for this. So I can drag through, and I'm going to look for that moment of impact. If I use the arrow key on my keyboard, I can go frame by frame. Perhaps I want it to maybe be about here. To zoom into my timeline, I can drag this. Now I'm zooming into this moment right here. Then I can take this, and you can see I've got this waveform. This indicates the volume of that particular sound effect. So you can see the volume is increasing here. So that'll help me actually get my timing a little bit. And I think that might work. Maybe I'll go a little bit more this way. You'll notice that it is snapping. Most of the time we will use this thing called snapping, where a clip will snap to either the markers or a clip will snap to another clip. So if I drag this way, you see that little arrow that was showing up right above that transition. It is indicating, or it is going to snap. It makes it a little bit easier. To turn snapping off, I would hit this here, and now it is not going to do any of that snapping. You have to really be careful with that. A lot of the times when people are doing this and they're not snapping, they get off a little bit or miss a frame. You sometimes see a black frame between. So most of the time, this little snap feature should be turned on. So let me see if I can time that up a little bit. And again, I can zoom in by grabbing this dot and dragging it. And then I will take a look, listen. So you can see my timing is off there because I had moved it. I'll just scooch it over a little bit. Maybe about here. Let's take a look. And I will just take note of this or tell you about these. So each of these little tick marks right now indicate a single frame. And you can see I'm zoomed in all the way, so it's the frame level. So if I hit play, it'll zip through very, very quickly. And by default, that first transition is going to be 1 second. And because this is 24 frames per second, you'll notice when I'm at 1 second, this is a 24 frame transition. So let's take a look, listen to that. So I think that's actually pretty good, but you see when that cube falls over, I think I want to add another sound. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to look for another sound that perhaps can take care of that sound when it's falling over here. Maybe I want a second one that's a little bit more subdued. And I was using this food squish one. And currently there are very few that are in this. Sometimes there are going to be lots of them, so I might view it in the list view and then I can go down the list. So maybe I'll listen to those again. So just spacebar. I think I kind of like that one, though it's a strange name for it. I'm going to close that window. I'm going to drag that over here, and then I can put that in here underneath. And I'm going to look for that spot where it seems like it would make sense. And you notice I put it on a lower audio level instead of right on top of it. Now if I go like this, what it would do is it would wipe out that section right there, and it would kind of cut between the two. So I don't want to do that. I want them to be one right after the other, or actually taking place almost at the same time, like this. Now you notice that it's still jiggling, and maybe I want a little bit of sound for it to continue. So I can zoom out and take a look at this. And Maybe I'll try a different one. I think that one might work for this. It's not all of it, so I'm going to drag that into my project, close that. I'll just minimize this. Then I'm going to take this here and drag it into my timeline. It is a bit longer. Maybe I'm going to put it about like this and zoom in, but I want it taking place at almost the same time so it blends into one another. So let's take a look, listen to that. I kind of like how this continues to make sound. It seems like it's wiggling, but the volume of this is a little bit loud. And I can see the volume indicated over here. What I want to do is lower the volume to this particular clip. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and maximize this window, or just increase the size of this window so that I can see. And here's that sound. Like I said, I want to adjust the volume. So I can select this clip, and then I can come up here where it says Effect Controls, and there's an arrow here, expand this, and then there is a level, and I can lower this. I can click and drag these numbers and lower it like this, or raise it. And I'll undo that. Or I can expand it and then adjust it here. Another way you can do it is, right now, this white line, this is indicating the volume of this particular clip. And if I pull down here, it's actually lowering the volume. I tend to not use that directly in here because it's real easy to do that accidentally. And I often see students do that. They grab this, they're trying to move the clip, and they move that line. I'm going to undo that. And instead, just with that selected, I'm going to come up here, and maybe I'm going to just punch in -12. And then I'm going to listen to that. I think that's probably a little too loud yet. I'm going to punch in -18, try and listen to that. The other thing is it sounds kind of fast, and you'll notice that this is jiggling kind of slowly. So I'm actually going to lower the frequency of this. And in order to do that, I want it to kind of have a lower sound. I'm going to slow it down. So I want to slow this down and lower the pitch of this. So I'm going to right click it and choose speed duration. And I'm not going to reverse the speed, I'm just going to slow it down so I can change the percentage. I'm going to say 75%. And now you'll notice it expanded, got longer, but that's also going to lower the pitch. Pretty close, not exactly. I do notice it cuts off here, but that part doesn't bother me so much as the pitch just isn't low enough yet. So I'm going to right click that, choose speed duration, and I'm going to punch in 50. Now this would depend on your own project. Now you notice it goes well beyond that, but let's take a look, listen to that. I think that's actually pretty close, but what I do want to happen is I want that, because you'll notice it kind of stops moving, I want it to fade out in the sound. So I can take the right edge of this, pull this in, and now it is shortening that audio clip. However, it is also cutting directly out, so it's going to sound cut. And I don't want it to do that. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose Apply Default Transition. The default transition for audio is this transition right here, and it is a constant power, but you can see here it's indicating that it is fading out. But I don't want it to fade out with the picture exactly. I want it to fade out before. So I'm going to go like this. Now you'll notice that it's going to jiggle and then fade out. And there we have it. That is kind of the basics to it. The next thing I want to do for this project is export it. Now I could add titles and things like that, but I'm going to be skipping it for this particular tutorial. What I'm going to do is export it. There is an export button up here, or tab. I click that, and this is my export window. I'm going to call this Gelatin Plop So this is Gelatin Plop Sean Mallinger, just my name. And the location, this is important. I want to make sure that it is going into my folder for Gelatin. I'm not going to put it in Gelatin Renders, just in this Gelatin folder. And then I'm going to click Save. Now, it didn't actually save it yet. Then there are some presets. I'm not going to use this preset, although it would render kind of quickly. What I'm going to do is choose this preset, the high quality 1080, and I'm doing it for this project because that is what my source is. If you look here, my source is 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second. So I'm going to choose that high quality 1080 HD. But I'm going to make some changes. Now, if I were submitting this as a digital intermediate, if I were sending this to someone else to do some editing, I wouldn't choose the H.264. This is a final output format that would be good for the internet. And for this project, I'm going to say that it is done. So I'm going to choose this, high quality 1080 and H.264, but I'm going to make some changes here. I'm going to expand this video. I'm going to leave this here, and I'm going to hit this More button. That expands it here. I'm going to tell it to render at maximum depth. That's going to give me a higher quality, and also use maximum render quality. Then I'm going to scroll down a little bit lower, and where it says bitrate settings, this bitrate encoding, VBR1 pass, I'm going to change that to VBR2 pass, though I will leave these numbers. And that's going to give me just a little bit more quality with it, though it will take a little bit longer to render, though this is a fairly small file and it should render fairly quickly. So then when I'm ready, I can hit this export button. So I hit export, and there it is. It is exporting or encoding the movie. It is doing the first pass, now it is doing the second pass, and it should finish in just a moment. There it is finished. The last thing I want to do with this is I want to do a file save or Command S. And now that project is saved and it is ready to go to other people. If I quit out of Premiere, and then if I check in my folder where I had been working earlier, I will find my final one here, Gelatin Plop Sean Mallinger. I'm going to double click that, and it will open up the default player, and I'll take a look, listen. And that is the basics for creating a gelatin cube, a soft body simulation in Blender. I hope you can continue to both tell and live good stories.